Welcome back. I'd like to introduce our next session, Plastic, the canary in the climate crisis coal mine. We have here our expert panelists who are going to explain to you why plastic is so interconnected with the climate crisis, where our plastic ends up, its true impact on our health, and whose job it is to fix it. It's my pleasure to welcome our incredible panelists to the stage. Joining us today, we have Sian Sutherland, Chief Changemaker and co-founder of A Plastic Planet, whose mission it is to turn off the plastic tap and dramatically reduce the plastic waste destroying our planet. I'd also like to welcome Dave Ford, co-founder of Ocean Plastic Leadership Network and Global Plastics Treaty Dialogue, who works to connect and catalyze all the voices central to ocean plastics in order to advance a global treaty. And last but not least, we have Ellen Jackowski, Chief Impact Officer and Head of Sustainable Impact at Hewlett-Packard, focusing on making positive and lasting impact on the planet, people, and the communities that HP serves. Without further ado, let's give it up for our panelists and get started.
Thank you very much, Amber. I think, can you hear me? Can you hear me okay? Is that working for you? It doesn't come out, oh, it does come out of speakers. How cool, I love that. My name is Sian Sutherland. Pleasure to be with you all. We arrived in Glasgow today, us and Joe Biden. There's been a lot of furore about him. God knows why. And what we want to do today really is to start to talk about this intrinsic connection of the plastic crisis and the carbon crisis. But somehow, some magical thing has happened that the fossil fuel industry have managed to uncouple these two things and make us believe that actually they're so totally separate. And we get it all the time, I'm sure you guys hear it too, of, you know, it would be so much easier. Let's fix the carbon crisis. It's all about emissions. And then we'll work on the plastic crisis. That one's going to have to wait. So what we're hoping to enlighten you, the three of us today, and please store up some questions because we want to be challenged. We want to enlighten you to the fact that these two things should never be decoupled, that they are so completely connected. And in fact, plastic is solid carbon crisis. So the first thing that we want to do is just go through a few of these words. And I love these words because they start with, obviously, truth. We're never going to move anything unless we understand the truth. Then we talk a little bit about whose responsibility is it? What is the risk element here if we don't change? What's the legacy for all of us? And here we are, you know, on the extreme hangout with One Young World, who for me, any engagement I've ever had with One Young World, you know that you are speaking to the future leaders of the world, the future leaders of our planet. So this whole thing of legacy is very important. And of course, there's always an opportunity, and we have to have hope. So a few things to just flick through. First of all, the plastic bags, which I feel there is an awful lot of blame about plastic, and all of us have sleepwalked into the nightmare that we see now. But then we also live in this world of a huge amount of myths, some of which we're going to be trying to explode today. So I don't know if you would realize this already, perhaps you guys know, but actually with all the media, particularly in the UK, where, you know, we get people in the States saying, oh God, you guys are so far ahead of us. We're really not. We just talk about it a lot. But the reality is plastic is up, and therefore plastic production is up. And one of the things in the UK that we really slap ourselves on the back about is the plastic bag tax, and the fact that there's a 95% reduction in the amount of plastic bags that we use every year since putting that 5p tax on it. And now we're looking at maybe we should increase it to 10p. What is the pain point to stop you buying a bag and actually reusing a bag? But the thing that we don't count in all these numbers, in that 95% reduction in the number of bags, is the fact that the bags for life, the infamous bags for life, which are meant to last not my life, your life, not even my kids' life, but 500 years at least. That's what a bag for life is for. They're not included in the numbers. So we're actually using more plastic making the bags for life, than we ever used for the 100% of all those flimsy carrier bags. And this is in a world where 60 countries globally have already banned the bag. Rwanda, South Korea. It's something like a $37,000 fine in Rwanda if you were found with a plastic bag. Whereas here, it's like, oh, what do you think? Is it 5p or is it 10p? We will never fix the bag problem. We'll never fix the plastic problem unless we all work as one. And of course, packaging, 40% of all plastic ever produced is used for packaging alone. And that's the visible plastic. That's the bit that we all have that plastic guilt now, don't we? You know, we're all, you go to the supermarket, you take it home, you free your food from these plastic tombs, you put it in the recycling bin to now realize that barely 10% of it is ever going to get recycled. But there is another use of plastic that is almost more insidious because we don't even know it, and that is textiles. 70% of all our clothing is just plastic bags hanging in our wardrobes. Nobody knows. And of ocean microfibers, 70% of all the ocean microfibers derive from us simply washing our clothes. There's a horrible little visual analogy for that, which is a family of 4 every single week washing their clothes. The amount of plastic microfibers being washed straight into the sewage system and then out into sea is the equivalent of them just going to the beach and throwing in a plastic carrier bag every single week. And we don't even know. So the whole thing about recycling, I don't know if anybody saw Boris, bless him, come out recently, 10 days ago, I think, and burst that recycling bubble by saying, oh, recycling doesn't work. We've been, we think it does, but it's never worked. It's never worked for decades. It's never going to be part of the answer. And the sad news here is that anyone who lives in the world of plastic knows there's this global stat, 9% of all plastic has ever been recycled once, rarely twice. But the sad news is that that 9% figure is even wrong now, because it's now gone down to 7%. So where is it all going? Where's all that plastic going, if you bear in mind that every single piece of plastic ever produced in the last, let's say, 100 years, if it hasn't been burnt, still exists on our planet today? USA, sorry guys, pointing you out now, but the USA, they know, are the biggest producers of plastic waste globally. Europe is number 2, but actually the country that is number 2 is the UK. So we, per capita, are the biggest producers of plastic waste. We're second in the league. It's one thing that the Americans beat us at. And we live in a world also where I don't know a single supermarket, or probably even HP, or any corporation that doesn't have some kind of promise, pact, pledge, commitment about plastic, because it's a vote winner now. It's something that people within business feel bad about. So what are they going to do about it? So everyone, Unilever, Mondelez, P&G, everybody, they have some kind of plastic charter. But we think that words are actions. And the sad news here is that every single voluntary commitment is failing. And they can fail because they're voluntary. So they can fail without any real consequence. And one of the things that Dave is going to be talking about is, if voluntary doesn't work, then what do we need? What is going to make things work? Because right now, the commitments that we have, and this is global commitments from every single industry, from every single government, if you add them all together, even if they were successful, we would see a maximum of a 7% reduction in ocean pollution by 2040. So clearly voluntary not only is failing us, but it isn't even enough. And that's a 7% of the trebling. And then we move to emissions, and this incredible uncoupling by the plastics industry and the fossil fuel industry to treat these two things in isolation. Because this is what we get pushback all the time. Myself and my co-founder, Fred, sitting here, when we work with industry on solutions is, yeah, but what about the fact that plastic is so light? If we reduce plastic, we're going to increase CO2. We're going to increase food waste. But the truth is this. 19% of the 1.5 degree carbon budget is going to be used up by the plastics industry alone. 19%. And if plastic production was a country, it would be the 5th biggest emitter in the world. So suddenly you realize, if we're not talking about plastic at COP26, if somehow it isn't on the agenda, then we're missing a massive trick here. And for me, it goes even further. Because when you look at, my personal obsession, my background is not that of an eco-warrior. I'm an incredibly unlikely eco-warrior, and I'm a very big plastic sinner. Because my most recent business as an entrepreneur was I co-founded and ran a skincare brand. So I can't tell you how many millions of plastic bottles I have personally pumped out into the environment. And then it struck me why plastic is such an interesting conundrum for all of us. Why is it so important? And we were just saying it's the canary in the coal mine of the carbon crisis, the climate crisis. And it's because of this. Because if you look at what has caused our global crisis right now, what has caused the climate crisis, it's this massive ramp up to these heady levels of hyperconsumption that we see right now, where we're buying so much stuff, we don't even have enough space in our houses for all of this stuff. And what was the one material that enabled in the last 50 years for us to ramp up to these heady levels of hyperconsumption? And that material, of course, that enabled us to make things so easily, so cheaply, so lightweightly, that we could use them once and throw them away. And of course, that is plastic. Last week, we were at the Plastic Health Summit. We are the founding partner of the Plastic Health Coalition, and this is a coming together of all the doctors, the scientists, the environmental toxicologists to irrefutably prove the impact on human health. And you will not be surprised to hear that there is an impact, and it is shocking what we are doing to ourselves. We are the first generation that will die more from non-communicable diseases than from communicable diseases. So this tells us that it is our lifestyle. We are literally killing ourselves voluntarily. And a major contributor to this are the toxins that are in our lifestyles. And plastic is a very toxic substrate. Some 40% of the weight of some plastics is actually chemicals to give it the most incredible qualities that it has. There are 8,000 chemicals that are used to make our plastic goods. So, we're going to move on to responsibility. Whose job is it? Is it governments? They're all here chatting today. Do we really think that they're going to fix the plastic crisis, let alone the carbon crisis? Is it the public? Is it you and me? Is it the way that we shop? Is it this mythical thing called the ethical consumer, where we have to just vote with our wallets when actually we simply buy what we're sold? And for me, it isn't that. It isn't anything to do with waste. It isn't anything to do with pollution. Plastic is a production problem. It's a design problem. So this is why, for me, when I look at that little burger of responsibility, the most interesting one is industry, which is why it's great that we have Ellen here today to talk a little bit about the responsibility, the role of industry. Because when we're at a whole convening of the parties, such as COP right now, the reason that industry are here is because they are the tool of change. We haven't got time to reinvent the tool of change. It has to be industry. So we have to make all of these things work for industry, and we have to get them to stand up to a different level of responsibility. Click. Because I don't know how this has been allowed to happen, where when you see the ExxonMobil oil spill, you remember the Valdez oil spill, and we were all kind of horrified and repulsed by the fact that this black slick was allowed to happen, but we knew who to blame. We knew who had the responsibility to go and clean this up. We knew who had to pay the fine. But what I find extraordinary is that a very similar kind of fossil fuel pollution, and here I'm going to cite Coca-Cola, sorry Dave, here I'm going to cite Coca-Cola, but they pumping out their 120 billion bottles every single year, so that form of fossil fuel pollution they have zero responsibility for. And to be honest, even worse, not only do they obviate all responsibility for it, they blame you. To say, why didn't you put it in the right bin? If only we could just train the consumer to do this. So when we founded A Plastic Planet, we wanted to create a very different kind of organization, one that was pro-business, because as entrepreneurs, we, as you can tell, believe in the power of business to do good and to create change at scale and at speed. So we had a very simple goal, which was this: to ignite and inspire the world to turn off the plastic tap. And our philosophy always is that if we just talk about blame and guilt, if we just point the finger at anybody apart from Coca-Cola, but if we just point the finger, then human beings work in a way where that just stultifies us. We are scared. We don't know which path to choose. We're scared of that guilt and blame. So our philosophy is always we have to work on solutions, and we never talk about the problem, because that's never going to get us anywhere. And at the moment, you'll see an awful lot of people simply talking about the problem. But it struck us as well that there is this weird thing. It's not just about plastic. It's about the fact that we think waste is normal now. And it isn't normal. 2 billion tons of waste are produced by humans every single year and dumped. So we literally just take everything from the planet and then we give back these 2 billion tons. And it also struck me, this word consumer. And we all talk about consumers. We all talk about, me, the consumer, my consumer rights, and what about me? And it's so weird that we even talk about ourselves as consumers. And I looked into it and found that actually that word consumer, it's a 15th century word, and the etymology of that word is to squander or to waste. And somehow that says everything now, that we even define ourselves as squanderers, as wasters. When in fact what we want to be is citizens, and you'll see that this next generation, they will never refer to themselves as consumers. They want to be citizens, to belong and to contribute. I'm nearly done. This is an actual photograph, and I feel it's very representative of where we are right now. And we're in danger of becoming so focused on the fear and the problem, particularly for the young, where there is this new thing now, called climate stress. I think it is absolutely no coincidence that the crisis in mental health is happening at the same time as the climate crisis. But we need to be careful of the clicker working. Or not. Yeah. And I love this quote. If one is mentally out of breath all the time from dealing with the present, there is no energy left for imagining the future. And we have a responsibility. My generation has a responsibility, and the youth have a responsibility. We're the generation that made this mess. I just want to be part of the generation that tried to fix it as well. But what we need to do right now is really help the youth reimagine this new future. Because if we can set this new bright goal for us, if we can stop talking about the problem and we can keep focusing on talking about solutions, keep focusing on hope and opportunity, and a lot of the conversations that you will be hearing over the next 12 days here are going to be about hope and opportunity. Speaking the truth, but also looking at what's the upside for everyone. And I think the upside is going to be extraordinary. And I think if we can wean ourselves from this misuse of a toxic and indestructible material, we will be amazed at how much else we can change. Thank you. And I'm now going to hand over to Ellen Jackowski of Hewlett-Packard. Do you just call yourselves HP now?
HP now.
HP?
Yes, we're HP.
Great.
And let's hope I have good luck with the clicker.
Yes, good luck with the clicker.
Hi, everyone. Let's see. Dun, dun, dun. Well, while my slides are getting up, hopefully they'll find them back there. I'm Ellen Jackowski. I'm the Chief Impact Officer at HP. And so the question that was posed here is, whose responsibility is this? It's my responsibility, right? I am the Chief Impact Officer of a really big company. We operate in over 170 countries worldwide. Our supply chain is over $50 billion. It's my company's responsibility to do something about this situation. We make PCs, printers, and 3D printing, which plastic runs through our 3D printers. So we are very familiar with this material, and it is our responsibility to figure out how to get us out of this situation, particularly for the products and services that we make at our company. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the big commitments that you've mentioned, Sean, that companies like mine are making, but then we're going to spend some time focusing on the action. What are we actually doing about it? What are our results today, and what are our plans for tomorrow? So when you think about, a printer, right, it is a box of plastic with some incredible technology built inside of it, of course. But we know as humans we need to print, just like we need to eat and we need to get dressed and wear clothing. So there are things we need to do as consumers, right? But how do we change that whole model? Instead of consuming and using, to really regenerate and think about a circular economy long term. And that's our intention as HP, is to really move completely towards that circular and regenerative economy. So we have a plastic strategy. Our plastic strategy begins with, number one, eliminate plastic where possible. The second step in our plastic strategy is, if you think you need to use plastic, question yourself. If you're designing an HP product or service, can we use a different material than plastic? Can we substitute it? For example, in our packaging, we're moving from single-use plastic packaging to molded pulp packaging. And we have a goal, one of those big commitments, right, to eliminate 75% of single-use plastic packaging in all of our products and services by 2025. Moving down that plastic strategy, if you can't substitute the material, if you have to use plastic, can you use recycled plastic, eliminate that virgin plastic, and substitute the design, which takes a lot of engineering and innovation, we'll talk a little bit about that, to be able to use recycled materials. If you're using recycled plastic, can you take it a step further and think about where you're sourcing that plastic from? So, for example, HP sources a lot of recycled plastic PET bottles, like these bottles here, off of the North American plastics market. But we're going to talk about a story where we've challenged ourselves to say, maybe we shouldn't source from there. Maybe we should find a place that has higher environmental and social impact. And that's the story that we'll talk about today. So, in addition, I want to mention another big lofty goal besides that 75% elimination of single-use plastic in our packaging. We also have a goal to use 30% recycled content in our products by 2025, and then a bigger goal for all of our materials across both our printing and personal systems business to be 75% circular by 2030. And what does that mean, 75% circular? That means 75% of what makes up our printers, our PCs, 3D printing materials either comes from recycled, renewable, or reused material. So this is going to be really hard. And so to the point of action, where are we today against that 75% goal? We're at 41%. Of any time you buy an HP product, 41% of that material is either coming from reused, recycled, or renewable materials. So getting from 0 to 41 was pretty tough. And took a lot of innovation, but getting from 41 to 75, that's like complete transformation. So taking this gigantic, huge company, one of the biggest companies in the tech industry, and shifting it away from all of those virgin materials to a circular model. So let's talk about the case study. The location that you're seeing here today, this is Haiti. It's a location where there's no municipal garbage collection, like where I live near San Francisco, California. A garbage truck comes around, like it does here in Glasgow, on a periodic basis to take all of my waste, whether that's landfill or recyclables. In Haiti, they don't have that process. So what happens is the plastic ends up on the ground when they're done consuming the product, flows out into a canal and typically into the ocean. So there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity for us because we mentioned all those products that we make, right? Lots of printers, lots of ink cartridges, lots of PCs. In our ink cartridge process, if we just think about that one, does anybody have an HP printer at home, by the way? Maybe, hopefully. Wonderful, good to hear. That ink cartridge, we've been doing a closed-loop recycling process for over 15 years. That means, hopefully, when you're done with your ink cartridges, you're following the process on hp.com/recycle to drop them off or send them in from a free mailing label to bring them back to our recycling center. We've innovated a disassembly process. Magnets come, pull the metal off. We recycle that metal and sell it back on the metals market. A knife comes down, takes out the sponge. We squeeze out the residual ink. We reuse that ink in a process. And then we're left with that plastic cage of the ink cartridge. We shred that, and we mix it with bottle plastic to strengthen it back up, fill it back with ink, and put it back on the market. So we've been doing this for about 15 or 20 years. And here was that question, the question in our plastic strategy. Can we source these bottles from a location with increased environmental and social impact? And the answer is clearly yes. Haiti was our solution. So we were using over 1 million recycled plastic bottles like this a day to make HP ink cartridges. 1 million bottles a day. That's a lot. So taking that purchasing power and switching it from the North American plastics market, part of it to buying out in Haiti, here's what we've been able to do. So we hired a team of local collectors, so job creation, with a baseline of a livable wage to create jobs in one of the Western Hemisphere's poorest countries. We then, this way, here we go. After they collect them, they sort them. And now look at the colors. The colors here are actually really interesting. What color is your HP ink cartridge? For those of you who have a printer. It's black. That plastic, right? It might have a different color top, but most of it is black. And the interesting thing about that color is it means, going back to elementary school and the color wheel that we all learned about, what color makes black? Every color. We can buy red bottles, gray bottles, brown bottles, green bottles, blue bottles, clear bottles. We can use any of those colors to make our black ink cartridge plastics. And that gives us a demand for a product where many other companies who've also set these big targets of using recycled plastic, they can't buy the dark colors. Because, for example, if it's for their packaging, you want to have that clear window to be able to look through it. And red bottles can't turn clear. So we're creating value for something that today has no value. Many companies can't use these colors. We can. So it's awesome for us to be able to enter that market and start creating demand for something that has no value. So we partnered with a local recycler in Haiti. After the collectors pick them up, sort them, they go through a shredding process. And this is what we buy out of the country. Shredded plastic that goes up to Montreal, where all of your recycled ink cartridges are sent at some point to be mixed with this bottle plastic, strengthened back up, again, refilled and put out on the market. So the trusty HP ink cartridge, hopefully you'll think about it a little differently now, but this was the beginning of a journey that is about scale and innovation. Maybe. Okay, whoops. Let me go back. So it started with the ink cartridge, but now it's in 160 HP products. So while we have the goal to eliminate 75% of our single-use plastic, we still are going to need to make the outer casing of our products out of plastic. While we've got lots of innovation going on about future materials, we need to think about this transformation and driving a regenerative economy. So while the packaging, the focus there is elimination, on the actual hardware, we're focusing on switching everything from virgin to recycled content to hit that 75% product circularity goal. So that ink cartridge inspired a lot of competition inside the company. So we make printers, but we also make PCs. So when the PC side of the company heard what the printing division was up to, with sourcing out of Haiti and incorporating it into the ink cartridges, they said, we want in on this game. So then we launched a product called the HP Dragonfly PC. It was our first, the world's first, PC made with ocean-bound plastic. That's now gone to the world's first notebook with ocean-bound plastic, the world's first desktop, the world's first display monitor with ocean-bound plastic. It's now scaled across our supply chain to 160 products. And that might sound, kind of interesting, but the innovation that it takes, because if you think about, what do we need out of our PCs and our printers? They have to be reliable. They have to be light, particularly if it's a PC. It has to be always on and functioning. And so switching from virgin to recycled content presents a lot of design challenges. It's a very difficult thing. And with this process, we've gone from starting with a speaker made out of ocean-bound plastic, to a fan made out of ocean-bound plastic in your PC, to the back panel of a display monitor, or the casing around your webcam, all made out of this material. So lots of innovation that's catching on, and again, the key there is scaling. So thinking about not just the environmental work that comes from this, but the social impact. Oh, let me go back. Well, you remember the picture that I saw just a minute ago. We'll just stick with that image. The gentleman collecting the bottles. We've been able to create over 1,100 income opportunities through this process, using over 85 million bottles sourced out of Haiti now, replacing those off of the North American market. And then with that, we also spent a lot of time thinking about the collectors and their families. So HP has never gone to this very first mile of our supply chain, in a way like this. So doing this was incredibly risky, and it still is, right? Haiti has earthquakes. Haiti has hurricanes. Haiti had a recent assassination. They now have lots of gang activity that is threatening our supply chain every day as we continue to build and scale. But when we made the decision to go into Haiti, we made it with our eyes wide open. We are in, and we're in for the long term. We started this in 2016, and we're still there today. So I think that's another thing that's really important as we all think about how to transition to a circular and regenerative economy, is how far are you willing to go? How committed are you to actually making it happen and making sure that when you create these big commitments and these big goals, you are really in it for the long term? And that's what we've proven we are here in Haiti. Again, going through all of these things that we never really anticipated. And we know there'll be other issues that are going to come up, right? That's just the nature of where we've decided to do this. So this picture here, one of my favorites. The kids of our collectors, many of them in the past did not have the opportunity to go to school. But through the support of HP and some incredible NGO partners that we work with, we've been able to set up several classrooms that support the children of our collectors, giving them education opportunities. So we've been able to bring down, pre-pandemic, I flew down with a bunch of these PCs, and we're able to bring them to this school, kids. Oh, wait, now we're going to see our collector. Keep going the right way, hopefully. Okay, and this picture is my favorite, because we also brought those printers into the school. So why is this so cool? Because what's inside that printer? The ink cartridge that their parents helped make, right? So their parents are out there collecting these bottles that the local recycler shreds, then we move it back up into Montreal, create the ink cartridge that then shows up in their kids' school as part of a product that they're making, part of a big global supply chain, again with jobs, with a livable wage as a baseline. So pretty cool to see kind of how this comes full circle. So back to this word of scale. So the plastic that they're collecting for us, those bottles, they're really dirty, right? They're picked up from the ground. There's a lot of sediment and debris on them. And if you try to mix a bottle like that with HP ink cartridge plastic, mix it together to create that new cartridge, there's contaminants in there that will affect the ink. And as a customer, if you own HP printers, you know that you want your ink quality, that print quality, that is number one, right? That's why you chose HP, hopefully. We are known as the best print quality in the business. But if we have contaminants, that's a problem. Your ink quality suffers. So what we decided to do, thinking about the full economic model of this, was to invest in a $2 million washing line, recycling infrastructure, which we know does not exist enough of in the world. Even in California, where I'm from, one of the top recycling states in the world, there still isn't enough recycling infrastructure to take all of our waste back. So we made a decision, again, to do something we've never done before, which is invest in this infrastructure at the very first mile of our supply chain. Typically not HP's responsibility, our supplier's responsibility, someone else's responsibility. But I think in this situation now, back to that ultimate big question that was asked, whose responsibility is it? At the end of the day, we have to be part of creating that change. We have to do things differently. We cannot keep making our products the way we've been making them in the past. We need to completely transform. So we are building this wash line to combat ocean plastics and to also help our local recycler then sell to other companies. Because if they're selling that dirty, contaminated plastic, even though it's shredded, other companies are going to have difficulties with that. They're going to have the same problems that we had. So we're investing in this to help bring that community to scale and bring that function to scale as well. So we got a new building down in Haiti, which was much more to the earthquake standards than where we started, which worked out well because when the last earthquake hit, everything was moved to this facility. And while there were some small problems, no big disasters, all of our workers were fine as well. So that was good news. But then came the situation. 10 containers of that wash line had shipped from Germany, where we had it commissioned specially to be able to have things like a generator that was attached to it, because in Haiti there is no, you can't count on a consistent electricity grid. So it had to operate differently than any other kind of recycling infrastructure that we'd ever dealt with before at HP. Commissioned in Germany, the 10 containers showed up down in Haiti in that new building. Then the pandemic hit. This was in February, March. The weekend before the no-fly orders came out, our team of builders in Germany and Montreal were supposed to fly down to take those 10 containers and build that wash line you saw in that photo. So we sat there, the team sat there, like, what are we going to do? You know, the plan is to scale. We need to stay on this. We have volumes we have to hit. Our customers want our printers and our PCs. What are we going to do? So we sat around for about a month and debated, does this program go on hold? Do we go back to sourcing recycled content out of the North American market? No. We hired a team of local builders. They'd never built anything like a washing line, but they had some skills, and we felt like over Zoom, we could train them. So our engineers in Germany and Montreal got on Zoom every day. 5 a.m. was the call, my time, which was pretty painful. We put in a high-def camera system on the ground in the factory so that the builders in these other countries could be the eyes to the hands that were on the ground and instructed them through the full build. So as this was going on, to add some more, oh wait, there's a, oops, backwards. Well, you flashed the Zoom meeting. Hopefully you saw like a glimpse of that. That was people from all over. Oh, to add more drama to the story, in the middle of the build, Tropical Storm Laura, that became a hurricane, washed out the bridge to the factory. So not only are we having to build this over Zoom, now the workers have to find a different way to get to the factory. So there was a route, much longer than going over the bridge, but again, just the drama of what it takes, right? How committed you have to be to create the change that the world needs. There's back to the Zoom meeting for a second. Okay, and so here was some of the first video of the wash line up and running. And here we were kind of celebrating, you know, across the world where all the different people were who'd helped build this thing remotely. And pretty just amazing to see. I have some audio, I don't think it's in this slideshow. The first time we turned on the wash line, and it sounds like a 747 taking off, like this amazing noise. And I sent it to our full executive team, like, listen to that noise. Like, that's the noise of innovation. That's the noise of like overcoming every possible obstacle, a pandemic, right? A hurricane, bridge washed out, like you name it, and somehow we were able to do this together. Here's the safety training. Oops, wait, go back. Can you guys control it? Okay, wait, hold on. One more. Okay, safety training. No, too far. Got close. We're getting close to the end of the story. Okay, well, wait, I want the one with the big ribbon. Here we go, Ed. So this is the CEO of our local recycler. So on the day, and you see the full wash line, remember the picture? Here it is now. You know, through the pandemic, we built this all together across multiple countries and multiple languages, by the way. Let's just talk about how Creole is the local language in Haiti. Some of the builders were from the Dominican that speak a different language. Like, we had a lot going on. But we got to this moment of the big ribbon cutting. So we had live feed, of course, over Zoom in Haiti. And then we had our team, we can go one forward. Can you guys do that? I don't want to go too far. Oh, that's backwards. Other way. One more. There we go. So here we go. So this represents the team in Haiti. I'm in San Francisco. Antoine's in Germany. Ian, I don't know, he was probably in New York. From our NGO partners. There's Jean-Luc, who's in Montreal, who led the Montreal build. Donald next to him. Then we've got some other team members from Germany. People all over celebrating around the world. We sent everybody recycled paper, red ribbon to cut so that we could all do it together, even though we couldn't be in Haiti like the original plan to celebrate. Again, this type of innovation, how we again have to think completely differently about who we work with. Like, would we have ever partnered with some of the people here and that you've seen? You know, it wasn't obvious. So this idea of collaborating in ways that you've never thought of before, pushing, you know, the disruption, thinking about scale, thinking about how to do things differently. So hopefully this leaves you with the sense that companies out there know they need to take responsibility. We do. It's our responsibility to change how we make our products and offer you a better, more sustainable way to use the things that you need, like to be able to print and to be able to compute. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave. Woo!
Thank you. All right, let me slide back. Can everybody hear me? All right. How's everybody doing? Thank you so much. Thanks, Ellen. Thanks, Sean. Thanks so much for having us here today. I'm excited to tell you a little bit about the Global Plastics Treaty, and I can tell you through the lens of how these convenings that we're running have come to life, and a little bit about what we do at the Ocean Plastic Leadership Network. And let's see if I can tame the, whoa, maybe not. Maybe not. Just gonna be gentle, gentle. Nope. How about gentle slides? They're giving me hand signals. Oop. Can I just call for a slide with you guys? Should we just make it, all right, cool. Clicker is gone. So we're the Ocean Plastic Leadership Network. I'll go a little bit about sort of our origin story and how we came to be. And I don't even really need slides. I can just riff and talk to you guys if it's easier. Oh, there we go. Let's just leave it here. So there's 11 million metric tons getting into the ocean each year. This is the best number that we have. It's based off of a study that was commissioned by Pew Environment and Systemic, which is a big international consulting firm, and it equates to about a garbage truck and a half of plastic getting into the ocean every minute, and this number is absolutely wrong. We say it's a fact because it's the best number that we have, but this was commissioned in 2018, pre-pandemic. How many pieces of plastic did you guys do having to do your little rapid tests today? If you think about the amount of PPE that's gotten into the system, we don't really know how much, but it's a lot higher than this number. And that's really what we're here to do as an organization, is to really go after solving the ocean plastic crisis. And it's one of the most complex, chaotic crises that's facing our planet, and we're not even close. Slide, please. So this slide is supposed to induce stress. So if that's the way it makes you feel, then it's doing a really good job. But as I mentioned, complex and chaotic, and it's kind of easier to break it down into different bubbles. And I think we're pretty good here. There's probably a few more bubbles that could add, but I'll just walk you through a little bit. So 193 nation states recognized by the United Nations, right? So that's the centerpiece of what we're doing here today. We see how complicated it is for governments to work together. We're going to talk about the Global Plastics Treaty that is on the horizon. We're optimistically thinking it's going to happen, but obviously that's huge. Then you have the solution set over here, where there's significant disagreement and really warfare about different solution sets. And that starts with like policy all the way around to cleanups. There's actually controversy about how much weight is being put into cleanups, not to mention Boy and Slat that's building the big ocean cleanup machine. There's a lot of controversy around this, right? When you start to talk about reuse and refill models that environmental groups are pushing, it's really significant. There's all kinds of different ways to do it. Upstream, which is where you're talking about shutting off or reducing the amount of plastic coming into the system, and then downstream, which is all about waste management, recycling. You have the financial sector, which is huge, which is pushing in a lot of ways for the plastic value chain and the companies that lie in there to do the right thing through ESG metrics, environmental, social, governments. Like they give them scores about how they do with the environment. Very, very sort of early stages. All this stuff is sort of crystallizing and coming together. But at the same time, there's a contradiction because all of these companies in the value chain have to work with shareholder value metrics. They can't do the right thing. A lot of companies that put stuff in plastic bottles, if they all of a sudden switch to a different material, wouldn't be able to compete in the marketplace. So you have advocacy and trade groups that are on behalf of the plastic value chain, working with government, local, state, international. You have universities, credible universities that are putting reports out for the value chain in some cases, and then for environmental groups. Sometimes that research can contradict each other to some degree. You have NGOs that are working with the value chain specifically to help them with their challenges. And then you have 1,000 organizations in the Break Free from Plastic movement that are dedicated to shutting plastic off at the tap, that are doing everything they can to work against the plastic value chain. You have consumers that are completely confused. They have absolutely no idea. In the United States, there's 7,000 different recycling criteria around the United States. Like one county to the next, you could recycle something or not be able to recycle something. It's impossible to keep track of. And as Sean said, we say 10 to 11, 10 to 14% globally. Those numbers are trending down. 7% is a new low that I've just heard. Maybe we need to change the slide. And then last but not least, certainly not least, and really taps into what Ellen's talking about, there's 15 million informal economy workers around the world that are mostly located in the global south, a lot of times at the fringes of society, that are in landfills, walking through streets, picking plastic up off beaches. They originally were called waste pickers. I think it's a lot more waste reclaimers is a much better way to describe them these days, that are helping get recycled plastic from the global south. They are the last line of defense in a lot of places between plastic and the environment. And it's a human rights and social justice issue layered on top of this unbelievably confusing mess. So I hope that kind of helped give a little light of just what we're dealing with. And again, there's probably more bubbles that need to be put on here, and we could do bubble maps inside of each of these, and we would be just overwhelmed with bubbles, and it would be a nightmare. But anyway, next slide. So the Ocean Plastic Leadership Network today is 115 organizations across all those bubbles. We work with big companies like HP, PepsiCo, Coca-Cola, IKEA, Unilever, a lot of the big consumer packaged goods companies that specifically are, like I mentioned, forced to put their stuff due to market conditions in plastic packaging. We work with a lot of the big NGOs that are dedicated to this as well, including the World Wildlife Fund, including Greenpeace, and a lot of those organizations that are dedicated to turning plastic off of the tap. So in this network, we have organizations that have been at war with each other for years. So part of what we do is tension equals progress. Next slide, please. Who we are as an organization, we are an environmental intelligence organization. We're an education organization, right? And we really believe there's 3 key ways to do this, and I'll get into specific examples, right? So experiential, taking executives directly to see these challenges in face-to-face. Interestingly, if you walk out this back door and you look down, there, at least when 20 minutes, there are these 3 giant swan, I guess, massive, they're sleeping. Next to the swan, there's giant nests filled with sticks and plastic waste. There's a Wilson volleyball, from the Tom Hanks movie, floating around. There's a tire. I mean, this, if you want an experience after we're done this, just walk upstairs and take a look out. Right next to here, over on the right, on the river, it's just a massive amount of plastic that has come together. And I mean, if you think about going to the global south, just take that and multiply it by thousands and thousands. I mean, when you take executives to see this, things happen, things change. I'll get into that in a second. Positional is getting these organizations that don't agree with each other to learn where they're coming from. A lot of times when we work with activist organizations, we're helping them understand how far industry's moved, right? Because a lot of the industry is moving significantly. Maybe not anywhere much as fast as the activists would like them to move, but it's important that we understand the battles that need to be fought. So that's what we mean by positional. And then factual, just rooting into what the reality is. Where can we all agree? And if you look how far the world has moved with climate, there is definitely a lot of place for agreement. If you talk about this COP and go back to COP26, it's been significant movement, and hopefully it'll continue. Next slide, please. So the way that we were formed was on one of these expeditions. We chartered a ship. As in our journey here, we used to take senior executives all over the world and immerse them right into the issue. So we would take senior C-suite teams to Antarctica, to Greenland. We'd go directly deal with anti-poaching issues in Zimbabwe. We've done a lot of work in human-wildlife conflict in India. When the plastic zeitgeist exploded in 2017, we chartered a ship and we took 165 executives, activists to industry. We had Dow Chemical and Greenpeace stuck on a boat in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, 500 miles off the coast of Bermuda, on the ocean, what we call the Ocean Plastic Leadership Summit. It was 4 days. Next slide, please. That's the ship. This sargassum seaweed acts as just like you'll see with the sticks outside, it acts as like a collection source, and so it's a really easy place to find the plastic in the middle of these gyres. There's 5 of these gyres where the current is spinning around. They're not giant islands like you hear, but they're tiny little bits of microplastics. And there's a lot of it out there, but it's not the kind of thing you could see off the ship. But if you go into these seaweed patches, you can pull all kinds of stuff out there. We had a consumer packaged good leader that found one of their toothbrushes floating out there in the middle of one of these gyres and was able to take them back to their CEO to show them. So it was on the ship that our entire organization catalyzed. It was such a powerful experience. Ellen was with us out there. That's how we met. Ellen was really influential in making sure that we had waste collectors on the ship as well. And some of her partners from Haiti came out of there. We were able to get them visas to come to the country to be able to experience out there. So we had waste collecting organizations from all around the world that were with us. It was extremely powerful, and these companies came back. So the CEOs from the company made quite a bit of work for their sustainability teams when they came back, and certainly so many different learning journeys. Next slide, please. Now, on the positional front, learning from the opposition, we, for a lot of reasons, I think because we started as this activist industry organization, we were asked by the World Wildlife Fund during the pandemic to lead the Global Treaty Dialogues, which has been an activist to industry virtual convening. Next slide, please. We've done 230 attendees. We do these quarterly. Each of these have been 230 attendees. We're doing this together with the World Wildlife Fund, with Greenpeace, with A Plastic Planet, with Systemic, and with First Mile, who Ellen works with in Haiti, to really bring together policymakers, brands, all around the Global Plastics Treaty. And I want to just deep dive, what is this Global Plastics Treaty? Next slide, please. So we've had experts from all around the world, from all these different bubbles represented. Next slide. We had Alok Sharma, the president of COP, Peter Thompson, the UN Secretary Envoy of the Ocean, introduce us. And let's talk a little bit about where the treaty stands now. So 100 countries, over 100 countries have come out in favor of a global agreement. Now, the treaty process takes a really, really long time. And these numbers are changing daily. We're starting to see more and more of significant, I would say, catalytic support for some kind of treaty. So when we talk about a treaty, universally harmonizing standards and definitions. So we're all, so if you're in the UK or if you're in Scotland, let alone municipalities in the United States, countries all around the world. So everybody's working off the same playbook so that environmental monitoring and reporting is consistent, because right now it's all over the map. And a lot of the reasons that we're getting a lot of support from industry and big companies is so that everyone can be held to a level playing field around the world, globally, and it's easier to get this material. Next slide. So there's been a ministerial conference that's been coming on leading up to UNEA 5.2, which is going to be happening in COVID depending, knock on wood, in person in Nairobi. And this is where they're going to decide the mandate to just start negotiations. So we're really, really early in the process. If you think about how long Paris took, we're way, way ahead of the game. Ecuador, Ghana, Vietnam, and Germany, with the support of the European Union, have been leading this ministerial series to try to come up with what the mandate is. How can they even start discussions? Next slide, please. Talking more about the COVID and what the vaccination rate in Africa is why we're really hoping that this thing happens, as I mentioned. Next slide. There's been a draft resolution that's come out from Rwanda and Peru and a like-minded drafting group. And this is supported by organizations and countries that want a more aggressive treaty. Now, the fault line, the big fight in this treaty is whether plastic reduction is going to be required. So essentially in the Montreal Protocol, it was the most successful global treaty that we have. The refrigerants that were causing the ozone layer depleted, there was immediate scale down of that. So this specific resolution wants to leave it open for negotiation to take plastic, the amount of virgin plastic, and bring it down over time. Now, there's another resolution that's come out from Japan that is going to leave it a lot less vague about whether that's going to be in there. So there's like 2 competing resolutions that are happening right now. Next slide. So, again, what we're doing is just trying to get everybody to talk. Just trying to let's figure out, because it's so complicated and there's so many different POVs. The POVs are changing all the time. Let's just make sure that each of those stakeholder groups understand where each other sits so that we can come together and just not waste any time fighting about things that are irrelevant. And I think where we've been able to have the most success has been right there. It's been figuring out where the battles are and making sure we don't fight about where industry is moving or governments are moving and coming together. You can turn the slides off. I think that's good. So I'm sure there's a lot of questions. It's incredibly complicated. One of the things that we've been able to do, in part of that's just been born out of this, is get into country-specific dialogues. So we've actually gotten funding since we launched this to do this, basically model the same thing in South Africa, in Ghana, in Nigeria, in Malaysia, Indonesia, and Chile in local languages. Because we can do this, we can do all these top-down international approach. We do our best to be diverse as possible, but I would say the diversity in this room to some degree reflects what these convenings look like. They're very, lots of folks from Europe, lots of folks from the US. But one of the big things that happened with Paris, where there was a huge gap and a hole, was getting the country specifically to start working on the national action plans, right? So a treaty is going to be this thick. This is how much text would be in a treaty. And then the national action plan for the UK or for Rwanda or for the US are going to be thousands of pages. And in Paris, nobody was talking about what was going to be on those thousands of pages. There was not enough local dialogue about what happens when a climate treaty is signed. And then 3 years after the Paris Agreement was signed, there were still bids for proposals from countries to get the McKinseys of the world to write these plans. So what we're doing, and this is not by design, it's what we've learned on this journey. And the plan right now, we have 6 countries funding, is to fund 70 of these country-specific dialogues to just really rapidly accelerate this and to replicate this activist industry, tension equals progress mantra inside of the individual countries, and then have our overarching international meetings become informed and have a forum for waste collectors like the folks that Ellen's working with in Haiti to be able to speak in their local language about why this matters to them, because the informal sector traditionally is completely left out of this process. So anyway, thank you so much.
So guys, I feel that we are pretty much running out of time already, but I just had one question for you both. That I'm an eternal optimist, and with everything on the treaty and the incredible stories that you tell us, Ellen, about HP, I just love your immediate gut feel for, is a treaty going to be possible? What do you think could be in that treaty? And how can we make sure that we accelerate this? Is that going to be just industry stepping in rather than governments? That was 4 questions in one.
Do you want to start with the treaty possible?
Yeah, there's 2 things that make me very optimistic. The first is that we've seen the petrochemical industry come in and say, we want a treaty. The American Chemistry Council, which represents the Dows and the Exxons of the world, have publicly come out and say that we want a treaty. Now, it's the minimum standard. It's that harmonization of standards and definitions. It's more like sort of tactical stuff. And then what's interesting is that we've seen the consumer packaged good companies, one of the ones you mentioned earlier, and a lot of, anybody that puts their product on a shelf that shows up on a Walmart or in a grocery store have said they want an aggressive treaty. So we're seeing industry coalesce around the idea of, and governments are following. So that's why I'm optimistic, because industry wants this and needs this for them to be able to hit the goals, some of the goals like Ellen talked about.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So, many of my corporate peers, again, we've all set these big goals, and we can't just have goals without action to actually get there. right? So right now it might seem like you're hearing all these companies, talk very loftily about what their plans are, and everyone's waiting, well, where is the action? Where are the results? We need to all work together. We need the governments to play their role, to level that playing field so that we can play our role and do the things like I mentioned in Haiti. So I think it's incredible what is happening, this moment and the urgency, and what's happening down the street here. Like, that's why we're all here together. Governments with companies, all parts of the community of networks that need to make this change. So I'm very optimistic, and even at times when one part of that ecosystem may not be doing everything they need to do, I think the pressure on the other side will step in to then continue to put pressure on the other side. So as a human society, we have to all take action together. We all need to play our roles, and I think the pressure that we continue to put, the pressure you as consumers put on us, bring it on. Like, we need that pressure. We need you to tell us to change our products, to change what they're made from. We need that sense of urgency. I'm driving it from the inside out, and many of my peers are too, but it's together that we will create the circumstance to really shift to the future that we have to survive as a society.
Just to add on that point, there are Ellen Jackowskis in all of these companies. Whatever evil corp company you would like to pick at, and point a finger at, and many of that could be very justified. There are amazing people that are dedicating their careers, that are taking huge risks to try to turn these aircraft carriers, these 100-year-old companies in a lot of cases, that move really, really slowly. And I'm seeing that and experiencing that leadership every day in people that are inspired, and so many of the corporate folks that are here today. And many of them, behind closed doors, will tell me how important it is for Greenpeace to be a part of the equation. Coming in, putting on orangutan costumes and raiding their corporate meetings and all these different things they do to add pressure. Like, they're secretly really glad because it helps the sustainability move. It puts pressure on the stakeholders and the board and the C-suite to move way, way quicker. So that's encouraging as well.
That's really, really positive to hear, because that famous saying, if you are not an activist today, whether it's within business, whether it's on the street, whether it's a member of Greenpeace or Extinction Rebellion, if you're not an activist today, you're part of the problem. And I think people are really waking up to that now. So I love both of your spirit of optimism, and Ellen, your can-do. And I just hope that there is a million more Ellen Jackowskis out there and a million more HPs to bring together those kind of fabulous stories. I thought that was a really powerful story. So thank you, both guys. And has anybody got any questions? Because we're just going to overrun and just hang here now. Yeah.
I want to thank you all for your work towards solutions. It's very inspiring to hear and see real work and real action happen. My question for you, Ellen, is where are your pain points? And how can we help serve those pain points? Is it with your shareholders? Like, how can we get you guys at HP to go for 100% recycled by 2030? How can we move more progress?
Yeah, so I would say, and I'll just speak for my company, at HP, from our CEO, from our board, all the way down, they get it. I can honestly say our leadership team understands what we have to do, and they're feeling that sense of urgency. And I do think the customer pressure that we see, the change in purchasing behavior and preferences, that's all very healthy, and I think we're aligned. Where we're struggling is in that innovation. It is how you simply formulate recycled plastics to be as reliable, as durable as virgin. How we create that back-end reverse supply chain logistics to encourage and make it easy for all of our customers to send their products back. With our ink cartridges, if you subscribe to HP Instant Ink, it's a service-based model. We send out a package of new ink cartridges to you. With that package comes an envelope that's prepaid for you to put your old empty cartridge in, so it comes back to us. For Instant Ink, we've solved that. We have that circularity of how to get it back. For many of our other products, while we also offer free recycling and take-back at HP, it's hard for the customer to get it back to us. We don't have the best reverse logistics, so we need innovation there. So the sense of urgency, the desire to do it, the commitment to do it is there. Why didn't we set a 100% goal? Because we're still struggling with the innovation, with the technology and the material availability to be able to commit to that. Now, of course, we know it has to be 100%. But what we can commit to by those timelines, we've come out with those numbers. But that is the intention, and we just need to continue to partner and collaborate with unusual suspects, like I mentioned in Haiti. Who would have thought that that's where we would find incredible solutions and innovation? But our eyes are wide open, so if anyone has ideas for technical solutions, that's really where it's at right now. Those are the biggest obstacles for us.
Thank you. I don't have a solution, but what was interesting for me, having sat through this morning, is there's a real contrast between your panel and the two we had this morning, which had young people on who are really not optimistic. And so my question, I guess, is wonderful that you feel that there is speed and there's urgency, but are we being brave enough? Are you going fast enough? And well done, HB, for coming and showing up and being a corporate in the room. But you began by saying, we need to eat, we need to dress, we need to print. Do we need to print? Are you being brave enough?
So to that directly, do we need to print? Not all the time, not like we have in the past. But there are certain times, as it's also been proven by carbon footprint models, where if you're using that information multiple times, the carbon footprint of printing a piece of paper and referring back to it versus the digital footprint of storing it in the cloud and never deleting it and paying for the air conditioning and the cooling and the storage on the data center, there's balances like to everything in life. So I think we as humans have to figure out how to change our behavior, how to ask that exact question. We certainly don't need to print like we did in the past. We don't need to have new outfits for every single event we're at. You'll see me rewear my clothes this week. I did not bring brand new outfits for every single day. So we need to change our behavior. Are we moving fast enough? Absolutely not. No. The science says no. When we add up all the country commitments down the street, no. When we look at HP, no. We're not moving fast enough. And we have to continue to innovate. We have to continue to push ourselves and raise the bar. My company has this vision, and we've said it publicly. HP intends to be the world's most sustainable and just technology company. Okay, what does that mean, the world's most sustainable and just? It means every day that bar has to be raised. So while we've done one great project here and it's scaling, wonderful, great, that's good. Is it good enough? No. Do we need to go faster, harder, bigger? Yes. So it's a mix of optimism, but intense pressure and keeping that urgency coming from inside the company, outside the company, but it's that innovation that's really going to get us to where we need to be.
And yeah, just to add to your point, I mean, I think what we are working to do, and Sean has been an incredible advisor, and she's been deeply entrenched in this work we're doing with the treaty. It's like we need to break all records for a treaty, and the treaty's got to be, it's got to have enough teeth that it's actually going to move the needle. I mean, we traditionally move at the pace that we've moved. Those young people that you heard this morning have every right to feel the way they are, and like their pressure that they're putting, and these next generation Z and the next generations that are coming behind that just are done with this is, I think, incredibly important. To push the boomers, to push the Gen X, to push the millennials to move significantly faster.
Conversely, I was at a young entrepreneur summit on Saturday. I left there, I was on cloud 9. There was so much energy and optimism and enthusiasm and intelligence, and the businesses that these sub-30-year-olds were creating, largely in the world of technology, but the way that they just thought that there were no boundaries for them. Everything was possible. And it was almost like the crisis has freed them, because we have license right now to think the impossible, to not just follow in the old ways, because the old ways have not served us well. So I think there is a moment, particularly for young entrepreneurs right now, and we need them more than we ever have before, because it's about material innovation. It's about systemic change. It's all of these things. So it isn't just thinking, how can we do what we did before better? We have to completely rethink everything that we do. I mean, I loved your question, do we need to print it all? Though I have to say, I did read a report on the carbon footprint of a digital poster is greater than the carbon footprint of a physical poster, a paper poster, because of your whole point of the energy that we're using to store all of this information. So that's the other thing that we need to be very careful of, and what I was trying to say at the beginning is we have to have common metrics. We have to tell the truth, and we have been living in this whole green mist of subterfuge and just looking at the numbers like the plastic bag number, the number that shows us in a good light, all of that has to stop now. We need common metrics, and things like a plastic treaty, a global plastic treaty, is the only way. You know, having wonderful Rwanda ban the bag has no impact, because we all need to take these kind of actions together. We're united by one ocean, one atmosphere. One man's trash is already another man's problem, as we've seen. So unless we all come together and a treaty is the only way, it's not going to happen. But what we have to make sure is it doesn't take 10 years. And that's why what Dave is doing, I'm so thrilled to be involved in, and Ellen, because if we don't all come together and accelerate this, the Paris Agreement took 10 years. We haven't got 10 years for plastic, let alone everything else. So we have to put our foot, this sounds terrible, we've got to put our foot on the gas. But let it be hydrogen. I think we're probably out of time. We out of time, Amber?
Yeah, sorry.
Hi.
Hi, Grant. Grant from Sustainable Business. I have two questions for Sean and Dave, and really, I also would like to congratulate HP for being here, and I think it's fantastic that companies can actually put up and do this and really face the music, because that's really where it's going to make a difference. But for Sean and Dave, how do we stop companies sort of greenwashing and selling this carbon neutral, this road to zero, all this crap? We actually forget about all the legacy. I loved Sean's presentation about all the plastic that's coming up until we get to all these goals, the 7 or 9% only recycling. You know, we've got to stop it getting into the even before it gets recycled. So how do we stop companies on that area for David and Sean? And then two things. One, the Amsterdam Coalition, the DOLA Coalition, did a very cool thing in the City Council of Amsterdam due to COVID. They actually had to give computers to really poor people in Amsterdam because everyone went digital. So I really think that's a huge opportunity, not just in the global south, but in the global north, in poor areas, bringing them into the digital world by using old company, HP and all your companies. There's something where companies can get together and work on that and recycle, so it doesn't get into recycling. Let's reuse and end of life. And I think the other one is what you were hitting on at the end of the day, which I really thought was quite cool about and the life cycle assessment. Sean, you said about the fact that some products like digital printing, it's got a bigger footprint than paper printing. We also have to really be aware of all that, and if companies start putting that on their balance sheets, that all the stuff that they're producing is actually, then it becomes a financial risk to them as well.
Yeah, because right now we have been taking 2 planets worth of resource every single year, and we've been making it as stuff and selling it as GDP. So we are literally taking the resource from our children's future. So definitely we need to buy better, buy less, share more, repair more, all of these things. And I think there is going to be a rising of new businesses, new economies that are based around those. And we're starting to see it already. For me, it comes down to laws. And I think it's so hard. Someone gave me this brilliant analogy of to be running a big CPG, a consumer goods company right now, is like you are flying a fighter jet and you've been asked to change the engine mid-flight. That's how hard it is, which is why it is so inspirational to see what companies like HP are doing. And it's almost worse because you're also saying, and by the way, when you're at the back there changing the engine, could you change the fuel tank at the same time? It's incredibly difficult for them to change. They have to have laws. And if they don't have laws and fiscal policy, they don't have a level playing field. And everybody in the industries has to hold hands and jump together, because otherwise they will also always be speaking to their stakeholders, their shareholders, saying, I'm sorry, but right now it's a nice to. We have to make it a have to. Dave, do you want to add?
Yeah, I'll be quick, but the greenwashing question, I think it's interesting, and it's like painful for a lot of the folks that we work for in the big companies that are saying, well, like, we're doing all this great things, and like everything we're doing is greenwashing, and our shareholders are demanding us to tell us what they're doing, and like green hushing is like the flip side of that. And I think it's a balance. I think anytime corporations are putting out anything positive, and certainly a lot of it gets put in their marketing, it's going to be viewed as greenwashing, but they like have to do it, and it just like is what it is. Like, as an organization, the companies that I flashed up there, we don't put out any of their press. We can't, right? We have to be just like neutral through, we disclaimers after everything that we put out that we're not supporting X or supporting Y. But I think that greenwashing, whatever you want to call it, is here to stay, because these companies have demands on them to be public about the good stuff they're doing, and I don't think that's a bad thing, right? But in the same note, it's tricky. It's a tightrope, and I think companies that legitimately get into communities and affect communities positively, and stuff like Ellen's doing, is a microcosm of really like what's to come, and hopefully more and more of that.
Amber's come to push us off the stage.
As ever, plastics is everyone's favorite conversation. We could all be here forever, but thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Dave, Ellen, Sian, it's been fascinating, and I'm quite sure they'll probably get bombarded with some questions as you leave the stage, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.